There seems to be agreement now that we need to see massive changes in education. And two key questions that we need to ask ourselves, if we're going to see that happen, is what is the education revolution about? And more importantly, what comes after the revolution? Because if you were to ask 10 people those questions, you're going to get 10 different responses. And we can do that in this room too. So there really is no consensus around what that means. That's why events like this are important. We need to get together and hash it out and share ideas and debate with one another and come around common visions for education. Because for some, the education revolution means closing the achievement gap and raising standards so that every child gets quality education. For others, it's about getting rid of standards, or most of them, and opting out of standardized tests. Some educators now are organizing themselves around 21st century skills and global competitiveness. Others are really fired up about technology and how they can drive learning in the 21st century, through MOOCs and blended learning and so on. And then there's a growing movement of people who really want to shift education towards personalized learning, learner-centered education. So the question is, are there commonalities to all of us? And I think if we were to listen to different perspectives, we would see that underlying our concerns, there might be some fears and anxieties about the future that we're trying to address through education. This is why education as an issue feels so urgent. These fears and anxieties, I think, have to do with the sense that we're simply not prepared, to face the massive shifts that are coming our way. Some of those shifts are already here. Climate change, youth unemployment, aging populations, a dwindling middle class, and also just environmental degradation. We simply don't know how to live sustainably. So when we start to connect education to these underlying fears, I think we begin to realize that it's not enough for schools to prepare students for the real world. What education today needs to do is to prepare young people to change the world for the better, for themselves and for others. They will need to innovate more than gadgets and apps. They will need to figure out new ways of living and new ways of relating to one another. Some of the best solutions today are coming from young people. The best idea around how to clean up the plastic waste in our oceans has come from this teenager in the Netherlands. I'll just show you his video.
I'm Bojan Slat, age 19. I'm the founder and president of the Ocean Cleanup Foundation. I've invented a method to clean up almost half the Great Pacific Garbage Patch in just 10 years, using the currents to my advantage. I was diving in Greece. I suddenly noticed I came across more plastic bags than fish, and then investigated the problem itself and why it's so difficult to clean up. There is 150 million kilos of plastic in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. In the past there have been many ideas to clean up plastic from the ocean, but they're all based on vessels with nets that would sort of go fishing for plastic. Not only would that take many billions of dollars and thousands of years, it would also create bycatch and emissions, and this plastic that doesn't stay in one spot, so it keeps turning around in the ocean. Why would you move through the oceans if the oceans can move through you?
And I've had the privilege of working with many young changemakers, including this young Canadian woman who I met when she was 15 or 16 through Ashoka. She's developing solutions for solar energy for developing countries. And this teenager in Argentina who makes customized tricycles for children with disabilities. So he makes them one by one, customizing them for each child depending on their different disabilities. So, education as a form of empowerment is why social innovation organizations like Ashoka, McConnell, and Radius, are entering the fray and the debate. Because education needs to be part of the solution, because frankly, it's been part of the problem. So some of you hearing this might wonder, is there anything new in this? After all, don't schools already claim to develop leaders and change makers? Don't all of them have something like that in their mission statements? Of course, what they say they do and what they actually do, are very different things. And books and books are being written now about how schools operate like factories and treat students as clones of one another, training them to be compliant workers rather than critical thinkers who think for themselves. Even elite schools, the places that the best students go to and the ones that actually produce the future business executives and presidents, they make students jump through arbitrary hoops and use those hoops to sort them and rank them. A former Yale professor recently wrote a book about the result of all this hoop jumping. He says, the system manufactures students who are smart and talented and driven, yes, but also anxious, timid, and lost, with little intellectual curiosity and a stunted sense of purpose, trapped in a bubble of privilege, heading meekly in the same direction, great at what they're doing, but with no idea why they're doing it. They become, in short, excellent sheep, the title of his book. I've had students come up to me and tell me, I'm great at problem solving. You can throw anything at me, and I can do it. But the problem is, I'm thinking, I don't want to throw problems at you. I want to know what you want to solve, right? And the reason I think of this, is that I've been working with hundreds of change makers all over the world for the last 10 years. And the one thing I've learned is that sheep can't change the world. It's not because they're not talented or skillful, but you need more than skills. You need a sense of purpose, a sense of calling, and you need to be able to identify your unique gifts that you can contribute to the world. And you need to risk failure and even make personal sacrifices from time to time. And from time to time, you may even need to abandon the herd. So one thing we should say about herd mentality is that it's not the same as popular will. It only takes 5% of a herd to shift the direction of the herd. And the other 95% will follow even without understanding what the threat is and where they're going. So for some animals, this is a good survival strategy, but for humans, this instinct can easily be abused. So as a vegan, I actually have some issues with using sheep to describe compliant human beings. I think that we shouldn't malign other species to talk about human failings. So if I could change the title of this book, I think we can come up with a better metaphor by drawing on popular culture. And I think a better metaphor would be zombies. So this is excellent zombies written with zombie font. So it's a bit hard to see right now, but you can make it out. There's been a resurgence of zombie culture in the last 15 years, and it's hard to explain why that is. I've asked young people, like, what's the fascination with zombies? Because I didn't grow up with anything in pop culture related to zombies. And most people can't explain this phenomenon, but I think that it might have something to do with this anxiety of being over-programmed by the systems around us and even by the technology that we have in our hands. Anyway, that's just my theory. What I do like about the zombie metaphor is the idea that we become zombies because other zombies make us into zombies. Anyway, so back to our sheep. So if we don't want to be sheep or zombies, what do we want to become? Here we can turn to another animal metaphor, that of the elephant. And so in the book, The Happiness Hypothesis, author Jonathan Haidt uses the image of the rider and the elephant to represent the divided self. So the rider is the conscious, logical side of the brain, and the elephant, who is much stronger, represents the unconscious, emotional side of the brain. This is why you watch cat videos and binge watch Netflix, even though you have a speech to write, But it's also why you dream big and dream big dreams and fall in love. So the elephant serves many functions. You can try to tame the elephant, but for the most part, you can't force the elephant to do something that it doesn't want to do. So the key to self-development is to understand the elephant within and to create a harmonious relationship between the rider and the elephant. In a separate book called Switch, the authors offer a 3-part recipe for change. If you want to change someone or yourself, you need to direct the rider, motivate the elephant, and shape the path. It's those three in combination that move people forward. Change-making requires all three, but the thing it needs first and foremost is the motivated elephant. The problem with schools today is that they've been designed entirely for the rider, and they've ignored the elephant. And so for me, the education revolution is really about the elephants, how to bring them into the picture and how to motivate them. It's time we talk about the elephants in the classroom. And we need to invite them in, get to know them, get to know each other's elephants, and only then can we truly know ourselves and know each other. Ashoka Fellow Mary Gordon does this with elementary school kids by bringing infants into the classroom and using those infants as teachers to help children understand their own emotions and their temperaments. Our temperaments are key to understanding why we respond differently than other people to similar circumstances. And so she gives them the vocabulary to talk about their unique temperaments even at a young age. 3 years ago, I found a school for elephants in Massachusetts. So 10 students at a public school in Great Barrington went to their principal and said, "We hate school, we're bored, let us create our own school." So over the next year, they created a school within a school. And for one entire semester, they didn't go to classes, they didn't take tests. Instead, they started every day with a morning check-in where they brought in their personal selves into the classroom. They talked about what they did yesterday after school. They talk about how they feel and just whatever's on their mind. And then every Monday, they come up with a question that they want to explore for the week. And every Friday, they teach their group what they learned through exploring their questions. And aside from that, they also worked on a big project that they do over the course of the semester. And on their own, they also decided that they would spend a third of their time working on a project that would have social impact, that would make a positive difference in the world. I went out there and filmed them for an entire week and put together the video, If Students Design Their Own School, and put it on YouTube, and 170,000 people have seen it since, and many schools have replicated this model to some extent. What they demonstrate for us is how engaging learning can be for both the rider and the elephant when it is not just self-directed, but inquiry-based, project-based, and cohort-based. So what I'm trying to do now is to adapt this model for high school dropouts, as well as Aboriginal youth and any young person who feels out of place in the current school system. What we will try to do is that in groups of 10 to 12, they will learn through self-direction, asking questions they care about, whatever they are. They will go through learning quests that will take them through a 5-part cycle that involves questioning, identifying a question to explore, understanding, learning what is known from different perspectives, explore what remains unknown, uncertain, and open to creative input, synthesizing, summarizing key insights, and create their own work to share with others. And lastly, teaching, presenting their learning, their work, to their group and online. And over 2 years, they will use these learning quests to build a portfolio that will demonstrate their skills. But over the course of 2 years, each student will also build a tiny house that sits on wheels, 130 square feet of home that they can call their own. So the house is a container for different types of learning across different disciplines. And because they're all building their own unique home, it's a way to discover who they are as well. So they're constantly asking, what is my home and why? So we're going to call it Tiny Home School, Build a House, Build a Life. And this was inspired by a 16-year-old kid in California who was inspired to buy a tiny home and decided to build one himself, even though he was not trained to do so. And to this day, he lives in that house in California, and he did it because he didn't want to be burdened by debt, like so many people of his generation. And I dream of that day 2 years from now when the students can unveil their tiny homes and have an open house to show people what they've accomplished. Just like this moment.
You must have taken a good shop class, huh?
Actually, before this, I only had one shop class, and it wasn't a very good
This
one.
was your shop class.
Yeah.
And how much, if you don't mind sharing, how much was
The whole thing, 12,000
Wow, and of course you can do that.
in increments, but yeah, that's why it took so long.
Doorknobs and things.
It's one thing I didn't have enough money to purchase before the open house.
Yeah, right. Hardware.
And there'll be like a dresser type thing right here just to hang clothes. It's been quite a feat to pay for it, but I've gotten about $1,500 in donations. And then I have a outdoor camper stove oven. I got that from Santa, I guess, for Christmas, and it was what I needed, so it was a very cool thing to wake up on Christmas to.
I'm Austin's grandfather.
And you were the Santa Claus for part of this?
Yeah, it was. I'm sorry for being emotional, but when he was 16, he decided he wanted to do this tiny house on a trailer. He saw it, I believe, in Sebastopol. And so I thought, well, you know, kids talk and have dreams. But when they came back with the trailer, I saw that he was really serious. So, you know, like grandfathers do. And they said, well, I'm willing to help you. And so we participated financially to help him get to where he is today with the finished product. And I'm just so proud of him.
So, and it's not just craftsmen who believe in working with your hands. Leaders like Mahatma Gandhi saw the power and necessity to make your own things and inspired a whole nation to do so. In the United States, a Unitarian minister in the 19th century wrote, "The home is the chief school of human virtues." Of course, he meant family and the home environment, but in one instance, he also meant building a house. He told a young man he knew that, "I see nothing for you on this earth, but that field which I once christened briars. Go out upon that, build yourself a hut, and there begin the grand process of devouring yourself alive. I see no other alternative, no other hope for you." Imagine a teacher telling a student, "Go devour yourself alive." You know? So that young man turned out to be Henry David Thoreau, the American writer and philosopher and abolitionist. And he built a little house for himself for $28 and moved into it on Independence Day, 1845. Thoreau wrote his famous book, Walden, while living there, and talked about how the cabin for him became a means for independent living as well as thinking. It's hard to be a free thinker when debt and mortgages enslave you to the system. So just to be clear, Tiny Homeschool is not a home building program. There will be no expert design curriculum on how to build a tiny house. We will build the homes through self-directed learning, sometimes teaching ourselves, sometimes asking experts to guide us. We'll figure it out as we go. My goal in doing this is to develop a model for self-directed learning that I hope the mainstream system can adopt, not just for home builders, but for musicians, artists, entrepreneurs, filmmakers, computer programmers, and social innovators. There are some logistical questions we'll need to figure out, but the most important question, I think, other than, does it work, is how do we assess it? How do we evaluate self-directed learning if everyone's learning different things? I don't think it needs to be chaotic. Self-directed learning makes very specific claims. If we just take a look at one definition for self-directed learning by Malcolm Knowles, he says, in its broadest sense, in its broadest meaning, self-directed learning describes a process by which individuals take the initiative, with or without the assistance of others, in diagnosing their learning needs, formulating learning goals, identifying human and material resources for learning, choosing and implementing appropriate learning strategies, and evaluating learning outcomes. There are specific behaviors involved in self-directed learning. We can start there and develop a set of metrics that are meaningful for learners today. And finally, I just want to point out that the pillars of self-directed learning actually map quite well to the building blocks of hope. Positive psychologist C.R. Snyder studied hopeful thinking and came to the conclusion that hope is not just a feeling. It's a human survival mechanism that consists of agency, believing that you can instigate change and achieve your goals. It includes goals, approaching life in a goal-oriented way, and finally, pathways, finding different pathways to achieving your goals and the ability to do so. If we start to focus educational outcomes on these capacities in our youth, then we will prepare them for more than lifelong learning, which they do need. We will also prepare them to face the uncertain future with hope. The hope they carry won't be naive optimism, but a proven ability that they can shape the world for the better and a motivation to do so. Only then will our education revolution be a success. Thank you.